What if I told you that the greatest ruler in the history of the Golden Horde, the man under whom the empire reached its absolute zenith, was a fratricide who seized the throne by force? His name is Jani Beg, son of the great Uzbeg Khan, whom we discussed last time. But if Uzbek built his empire on strength and Islam, his son began his reign with the blood of his own family. He cold-bloodedly eliminated his two brothers to take the throne. On the surface, this looks like the beginning of a tyranny. But here lies a paradox that historians still can't unravel. The Rus Chronicles, which despise the Horde, call this brutal usurper the good Khan Jani Beg, and Muslim authors went even further, bestowing upon him the title Aziz, the Saint. How is that possible? Today we will uncover this mystery. You will learn, why did Jani Beg have to kill his brothers, and did he have any other choice? How did he manage to earn a reputation as the good Khan while ruling the most formidable empire in Eurasia? How did his greatest triumph, the capture of Tabriz, turn into a fatal mistake and cost him his life? And why was it he, the good Khan, who unwittingly opened the gates of chaos, the very same great troubles from which our next hero, the Temnik Mamai, would emerge? This is a story about how holding on to power is harder than seizing it. The story of a ruler who held half the world in his fist for 15 years, but failed to notice death creeping up on him from inside his own tent. It isn't just a biography. This is an anatomy of power, one built on paradoxes. How can one be both a saint and a murderer at the same time? And what price does an empire pay for its good master? Let's dive in. The year is 1341. The Golden Horde is at the absolute peak of its power. The empire built by Uzbek Khan stretches from the Danube to the Irtish. It is wealthy, powerful, and inspires terror. And at this moment, Uzbek Khan dies. The empire holds its breath. According to law and Uzbeg's will, the throne should pass to his eldest son, Tinibeg. But there's a problem. Tinibeg, a loyal commander, is away on a military campaign, far from the capital. And power in Sarai, the capital of the Horde, is a vacuum that is filled instantly. Jani Beg, Uzbek's younger son, is in the capital, and he understands the Mongol proverb perfectly. The throne belongs to the one who sits on it. Perhaps Jani Beg did contemplate his filial duty to his older brother, the legitimate heir, Tinibeg. But while he was contemplating, reality was already moving faster than he was. Behind his back, Uzbek's powerful widow, the Khatun Taidula, and the court elites were already weaving their own intrigue. They feared the strong-willed Tinibeg and were placing their bets on another brother, the more pliable Khidrbeg. And in that moment, Jani Beg realized the full irony of his position. He was caught in a death trap. If he remained passive, awaiting the legitimate Khan, he would be killed, either by a returning Tinibeg, who would see him as a dangerous rival, or by Khidrbeg, installed by the elites and clearing the board of competitors. The son of the greatest Khan was one step away from death. And Jani Beg makes his choice. He decides not to wait. He decides to act. He acts not just quickly, but with lightning speed. While Tinibeg is returning from his campaign, suspecting nothing, Jani Beg gathers warriors loyal to him and gives the order. The legitimate heir, the elder brother, the son of Uzbek Khan. Tinibeg was met by Jani Beg's emirs in the city of Sarai on the Yaik River. There, in that fortress, he was assassinated as a result of the conspiracy. But that wasn't enough. there was still a second rival, the puppet of the elites. Tinibeg storms the palace and kills his second brother, Khidrbeg. He eliminates everyone. In just a few days, in 1342, Tinibeg transforms from a younger son into the sole heir. The throne is drenched in the blood of his own family. And now, let's break down why he did it. This was not a spontaneous fit of rage or a pure lust for power. It was a cold, pragmatic, and, within the logic of the Golden Horde, the only possible calculation. Tinibeg grew up at the court of his father, who himself had come to power through bloodshed, killing 120 Chinggisids. Tinibeg had learned the lesson. In the Horde, there are no concepts of legitimate or illegitimate. There is only alive and dead. He could trust neither the elites nor his own brothers. If he had shown mercy, he would have been seen as weak, and weak Khans in the Horde were overthrown within the year. By killing his brothers, he didn't just seize the throne, he showed the old aristocracy that Uzbek's son had inherited not only his name, but his iron will. It was a terrible, bloody foundation, but it was on this foundation that he would build 15 years of absolute power. So, the throne has been seized. Tinibeg is a fratricide, his hands soaked in blood. The entire empire, and especially Rus, froze in terror. They expected a terror of reign, brutal raids and repressions for the new Khan to establish his authority through fear. But instead, Tinibeg chooses a path that none of his contemporaries could foresee. He stops the raids. Over the 15 years of his reign, the Rus Chronicles will note only one minor campaign on the frontier. One. For comparison, his father, Uzbek, marched on Rus regularly. Tinibeg understood something his dead brothers did not. A throne won by the sword must be held with mercy, or at the very least, a skillful imitation of it. He began to put on his new mask, the mask of the good Khan. And in the next module, we will see how this mask would become so fused to him that it would deceive both his contemporaries and historians. So Tinibeg ascended the throne over the bodies of his brothers. But instead of drenching the empire in blood, he begins to rule like a sage. Thus begins the strangest period in the history of the Horde. At this moment, all of Eurasia is in flames. In Europe, the 100 Years' War is beginning, and along the Great Silk Road, the Black Death is already creeping, the plague that will soon wipe out a third of the continent. In Rus, the princes, having just survived Uzbeg's terror, are braced for the worst. They travel to Sarai to bow before the fratricide, expecting executions, new taxes, and devastating raids. And what do they find? Instead of a monster, they find a calm and reasonable arbiter. Tinibeg receives Simeon the Proud, the Prince of Moscow, and confirms his title as Grand Prince. He doesn't demand blood. He doesn't demand humiliation. He demands only one thing: order and the timely payment of tribute. It is at this moment that the phenomenon of the good Khan is born. The Rus chroniclers, unable to believe their eyes, write, "The Khan is good, merciful, just." Why? Because Tinibeg completely halted punitive expeditions. In 15 years, not a single major raid. This was unthinkable. He transformed the Horde from a machine of terror into a supreme court. If the princes had a dispute, they didn't ride out against each other with swords. They traveled to Sarai, to Tinibeg, and he judged them. He wasn't just good, he was good for business. Moreover, he takes an unprecedented step. He issues a new yarlik, or charter, to Metropolitan Theognostus,
completely exempting the Russian Orthodox Church from all taxes and tribute. He understood, to control Rus, you don't need to burn their cities, you need to control their souls. And what about the Arab and Persian chroniclers? Arab and Persian chroniclers were enthralled with him. Jani Beg was a devout Muslim, building mosques and madrasas. He became so immersed in religion that his contemporaries even nicknamed him Aziz, or the Saint. Now let's dissect this paradox. Was he truly good? No. He was a brilliant pragmatist. Both the princes and the imams genuinely believed that a just and pious Khan had finally arrived, one who cared for them. But in reality, Jani Beg was simply conserving his strength. He allowed Rus to collect tribute for him on its own, while he amassed an army and resources for one primary objective. He had a plan. Ironically, he behaved like a calculating gardener who stopped shaking the tree to gather unripe apples. He let the fruit ripen peacefully so that he could later collect the entire harvest. His gaze was fixed not to the north, on the forests of Rus. He was looking south, towards the fabulously wealthy, sun-drenched lands of Azerbaijan and Persia. For 14 years, he played the role of the good Khan to gather strength for one single, decisive blow. And so, 15 years of peace and goodness came to an end. The empire had grown fat. The army was ready. Rus was dutifully paying its tribute. In 1556, Jani Beg throws off the mask of the saint. He assembles a colossal army. But this army is not marching on Rus. It is marching south to conquer the Chobani dynasty in Persia. His target is the city of Tabriz, a legendary capital, a nexus of the Great Silk Road, a city wealthier than 5 Rus principalities combined. Jani Beg stood on the precipice of his greatest triumph. This was meant to be the apogee of his power, the moment when the Golden Horde would reach its maximum historical size. But neither the Khan nor his warriors knew one thing. Along with the treasures of Tabriz, they would bring back to the Horde something that would kill the Khan and the empire itself. The year is 1357. Jani Beg, at the head of a massive army, invades Azerbaijan. This was not just an army. This was the entire might of the Horde, accumulated over 15 good years, unleashed in a single strike. His opponent, the ruler of Tabriz, Malik Ashraf, was known for his cruelty and fabulous wealth. He ruled the region like a tyrant, and the local population hated him. Jani Beg played the good Khan card again, but this time as a liberator. The campaign was lightning fast. Ashraf's army was shattered, and he himself fled, but was captured and executed. Jani Beg entered Tabriz. What he saw there staggered even the imagination of the Khan of the Golden Horde. The treasuries of Tabriz were overflowing with gold, silks, and precious stones, accumulated over decades of control over trade routes. The local population welcomed Jani Beg as a savior from tyranny. It was an absolute triumph. Khan Jani Beg, the fratricide, the good Khan, the saintly Aziz, now stood in the capital of Persia. He had annexed Azerbaijan to his domains. At this very moment, the Golden Horde reached its greatest geographical extent in its entire history, from the Danube in the west to the depths of Siberia in the east, and now down to Tabriz in the south. Never before and never again would the empire be so vast. And now, let's analyze this peak. Jani Beg had achieved what his father, Uzbeg, could only dream of. He wasn't just ruling over nomads, he had captured one of the most ancient cultural and economic centers of the world. He was on top of the world. He appointed his son, Berdi Beg, as governor in Tabriz, and he himself, taking immeasurable riches, headed back to Sarai, his capital. It seemed that decades of a golden age lay ahead. But Jani Beg, intoxicated by victory, failed to account for two things. First, ruling Tabriz was not the same as ruling Rus. The Persian elite were treacherous and had no intention of tolerating the rule of nomads. And second, of greater horror, he didn't notice that poison had already seeped into his own tent, into his own family. The triumph was short-lived. Immediately after taking Tabriz, Jani Beg suddenly falls gravely ill. No one knows what it is. Was it the plague itself, the Black Death, which his army could have contracted in the crowded city of Tabriz? Or was it poison? News of the Khan's illness reaches his son, Berdi Beg, who was left behind in Tabriz. And what does the loyal son do? He immediately abandons the conquered city. He abandons the army, the post entrusted to him, and rushes to Sarai. Why? To help his ailing father, or to make sure his father wouldn't survive? Jani Beg, the conqueror of the world, lay helpless in his tent. He who began his journey by murdering two brothers now looked into the face of his own son, and in that gaze he perhaps saw, for the first time, a mirror image of his own destiny.
Sarai, capital of the world. Jani Beg, the conqueror of Tabriz, the good Khan, lies in his chambers, struck down by a mysterious illness. The physicians are powerless. His body, which had held half a continent in its grip, now refuses to obey him. At this moment, his son, Berdi Beg, storms into the capital, having abandoned the newly conquered Azerbaijan. Sarai, the capital of the world. A different, much darker story. Berdi Beg, entering the chambers, sees a feeble father. He sees not a Khan, but an obstacle. He sees his chance. What happens next is shrouded in the fog of courtly intrigue. Most sources agree on one thing. Berdi Beg did not wait for the illness to run its course. He gives the order. According to one version, he strangled his father. According to another, he was killed by emirs on his son's command. The circle was complete. Jani Beg began his journey in 1342 with the cold-blooded murder of two brothers to seize the throne. In 1357, his own son kills him to accelerate the transfer of power. The fratricide had fallen at the hands of a patricide. This was not just a death, it was a verdict. Now, let's analyze this irony. Jani Beg was a brilliant politician. For 15 years, he wore the mask of the good and the saint. He deceived the Rus princes, the Persian nobles, and the Arab historians. He deceived everyone except for one person, his son. Berdi Beg grew up at his father's court. He saw how he came to power. He saw that behind the mask of goodness lay an ice-cold calculation. His father had taught him the primary law of the Horde. Power is not inherited, it is taken. Jani Beg, by killing his brothers, thought he was solving the problem of succession once and for all. In reality, he was teaching a lesson, and Berdi Beg learned that lesson brilliantly. Jani Beg's death wasn't just the end of a reign, it was the death of the entire system he had built. He was the linchpin that had held the empire together for 15 years, and now that linchpin had broken. Berdi Beg, having killed his father, immediately proclaims himself Khan. And to reinforce his lesson, he does something that even Jani Beg never dared to do. He carries out a total purge. He kills 12 of his brothers, all of Jani Beg's other sons, every last one. He thought that by doing this, he was ensuring a peaceful reign for himself. He was wrong. 2 years later, Berdi Beg himself would be killed. And with the death of the last direct descendant of the good Khan, not a single legitimate heir was left in the Golden Horde. The empire that Jani Beg had spent 15 years holding together would explode from within. An era would begin that the Rus chroniclers would call the Great Troubles. 20 years of civil war, chaos, and blood. And it is precisely from this bloody chaos, from the ashes of Jani Beg's empire, that our next hero will rise. A man who was not a Chinggisid, but who would become the de facto ruler of the western part of the Horde, an emir to whom the Khans themselves would be subservient. His name was Mamai. So, in 1357, Khan Jani Beg, the good and the saint, was killed by his own son. His son, Berdi Beg, who had killed 12 of his own brothers, ruled for only 2 years before he too was killed. But this was not just the end of a dynasty, it was the collapse of the entire system. Jani Beg's reign has gone down in history as the apogee of the Golden Horde's power. But the irony is that this very good Khan became the unwitting cause of its greatest catastrophe. This wasn't just a change of rulers, it was the end of the Golden Age. The empire that Uzbeg had built with force and that Jani Beg had held together for 15 years with cunning was sustained only by their personal will. This story demonstrated that a system built on violence can only beget more violence. Jani Beg's goodness was merely a mask, and beneath it hid the same ice-cold calculation of a fratricide. His son simply copied the original, and everyone took advantage of this deadly lesson. The subsequent 20 years of the Great Troubles shattered the Golden Horde to its foundations. It was this chaos that would allow the Principality of Moscow to grow strong. And it was in this chaos that the phenomenon of a man who was not a Khan by blood, but became one in essence, would be born. Thank you for watching this episode all the way to the end. The paradox of Jani Beg is one of the most complex in our history. Was he a genius whose mask of goodness gave the empire 15 years of peace? Or a tyrant whose original sin poisoned his entire legacy? Let us know what you think in the comments. Your support and your opinions are the best reward for our work. And in the next episode, we will plunge into the very heart of this chaos. We'll tell the story of the man who rose from the ashes of the Great Troubles to challenge Moscow itself. We will talk about Mamai. Subscribe to the channel and don't miss it.